Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this special leadership episode focused on all things founder-led sales. My name is Armand and I'm here with my co-host, Mark Kosklo. And today, we have the grandfather, the legend of founder-led sales. He is the one and only Pete Kazanjy. He is the author of Founding Sales, the early stage go-to-market handbook. He is the founder and CEO over at Atrium, and he is also the founder of Modern Sales Pros. And if you want to be a founder one day, if you're doing early stage sales, or if you just want to know what it is like to sell your first customers as a founder, this is the one for you. Mark, why should people listen?
I think you nailed it, man. Pete Kazanjy has done more in the startup world than almost anybody I've ever met. He knows everybody, he's connected to everybody, and he's done it twice. This is his second startup. It's gaining momentum, it's doing its thing, and I think there's a lot to learn.
All righty, Pete, welcome to the show. We start every show with your top 3 actionable leadership, or in this case, founder-led sales takeaways. Let's get your 3.
Yeah, so first takeaway and tip is on prospecting for your first customers. We're going to be talking about all founder-led selling things here. First tip is on prospecting, identifying your ICP of your organizations you should be going after and the humans within it. Got to make sure we're targeting accounts that have the problem that we solve. So being very crisp around identifying organizations based on the size of them, maybe the type of technologies that they have in play that we know are indicative of the problems that we solve. And then importantly, who are the humans within those organizations that we should be engaging? Then the second component of that is the outbound communication to then get in contact with those contacts. So messaging that out, identified you for these reasons right here. These are the characteristics that made me think that you have this challenge that we're potentially are thinking about solving. I'm doing some research on this right now. Would you be open to chatting with me?
We landed our first meeting. What's number 2?
Cool. Now we got to talk about interviewing them, right? Getting information out of the prospect. You want to have a deck that guides the conversation. The first thing you want to start out with is, do you have this problem that we are thinking about solving, right? Then get to the magnitude of that problem. Like the easy way of doing it is scale of 1 to 5, because if you want them to be able to say, yeah, I have this problem, but it's not that big of a problem. You want people who have really the big problems. Then the thing we want to figure out is, how are you solving this problem right now? And then how happy are you with that right now? And then what you can do is you can pivot to, great, here's how we're thinking about solving this. Let me go ahead and tell you about that. What are your reactions to that? How appealing does that sound on a scale of 1 to 5? If you just have those basics, you're going to get really good information out of your customer interviews.
Alrighty, so you're getting 4s, you're getting 5s. It's going well. Bring us to takeaway number 3.
Well, if we're getting 4s, we're getting 5s. People say, man, I really have this problem. Like, my current solutions are really not getting it done. Then what we want to do is we want to go after the close. And so that close might be, hey, would you like to be a beta customer for us? But if it turns out that we have a bunch of people who have really high pain points associated with this, the close could be for a sale, right? Okay, we have a number of pilot customers. We have a couple openings for more. So if you're interested in that, we could talk about that. Then you might end up in your customer interviews with a half dozen or a dozen pilot customers giving you $50,000. But again, it's a read option off of the magnitude of their pain.
How do you entice people into those conversations? Because everybody's busy, man. Nobody wants to hear another startup idea.
I think there's 2 things. One, you can maybe by doing content production and kind of community associated with whatever the category of thing is that you're attacking. So that's one way you can go about it. Maybe there's already like a bunch of content and community in the market that you're going after, in which case you just got to figure out how to get into the organizations. Like, you got to show up and like we were saying in the outreach component earlier, hey, I'm the founder of XYZ. I specifically targeted you because I saw that your company had this characteristic and you have this characteristic right here. I am doing research on this problem that I think you may have, unless I'm crazy. So you put those 2 things together, where this is the founder of XYZ. They were obviously very thoughtful in identifying me. They are using the words that actually resonate with me because they've done these interviews. And so they're talking my language here. And the only thing that they're doing is like a 30-minute interview with me. This isn't going to feel like a huge sales pitch. Okay, I'd be open to that. But if you got to have all of those things coming together in order to get a meeting on the calendar.
So the 3 or 4 parts of it that you had were, I noticed this and this about you. Here's the problem that I'm working on, solution that I'm having in the market, and then the ask for an interview. what is the best thing to put in that first bucket of I noticed this and this value?
It would be whatever is correlated to the problem that you're solving. So like I'll use Atrium as an example. Hey, Mr. CRO. Hey, Ms. CRO. Based on my LinkedIn research, it looks like you have 20 managers over there. That's a lot of people to wrangle. If you're like any of the CROs that I've talked to recently, I imagine that getting all those managers to manage in a consistent fashion to drive high performance on those teams is something that maybe is making you pull your hair out. I'm doing some research on how to help sales leaders drive more consistency in their managerial process, specifically around performance management and what have you. We have some ideas, but obviously we'd like your feedback on this. Would you be open to a 30-minute interview with me?
The thing that I want to call out for everyone is the number one thing that you're leading with is, I noticed you're this type of person with these types of traits that have this type of problem. Nothing about that is about your solution yet. And this is probably the most common thing that I find myself correcting when I'm working with folks on the early stage of selling is oftentimes they're leading with features, they're leading with product, they're leading with, hey, we're 3 founders from Wharton or MIT or whatever it is. And don't get me wrong, that stuff can go in the signature, it can go at the bottom of the solution, but until you've established problem and gotten someone to sit up and be like, oh, this person actually knows something about my business, they speak my language, the solution sounds like a massive nothing burger to them. And so you do this initial outreach, and let's say that you reach out to 100 CFOs or 100 CROs, and you book 10, 15 meetings, however many meetings. It'd be great if you booked at least 10. You take those first calls. What do you say when you jump on a call with a CRO or a VP of sales if you're just starting out at Atrium?
It's, hey, thanks for joining us. I'm going to take you through some questions associated with the problem that we think people are potentially going to solve. And it's really important to lean into we think, we have a hypothesis, et cetera, because like what you want them to do is you want them to feel at home being like, nah, brah, I don't have that problem, right? Because that's important information. And then you hear that 10 times, like, ooh, maybe this market doesn't exist. Like maybe we shouldn't be going after this. But you want them to be able to be honest, right? So, hey, going to ask you some questions around some hypotheses. We want you to be honest about it. And then we'll share a little bit about how we think we're going to go about solving this. For the sellers and the sales managers and the sales leaders in the audience, you may hear that and be like, wait a minute, that sounds like an upfront contract from like a disco call. What? It's like, yeah, same thing. You talk to a VP of sales. Imagine you were talking to Armand when he was the VP of sales at Pave, and maybe he's got 6 reps or whatever, or maybe he's got 2 sales managers and him, and you're talking about this, and he's like, yeah, not really. We're all in the same sales bullpen, and I'm sitting next to both the managers. We don't really have this problem. You just learned something. Right? Like this size of organization that has 2 managers or 3 managers or 4 managers, they don't have this problem. But then you'll get above a certain size. Oh, okay, cool. You've got 10 managers. Then all of a sudden that problem starts going into the 4 and the 5 range. Here's the segment that I'm going to be going after. And so that's why you want to cast the net a little bit wider and then do these interviews to hone in on where the size of the organization or some characteristic of the organization are where this is like a white hot problem. The second piece is, how do you solve this problem right now? What's unsatisfactory about this? You'll start seeing patterns in there. So like in our case, when we were doing all of our customer interviews, the pain point would show up when organizations had substantial numbers of managers. The way that they would typically be solving the problem is with standard business intelligence like Tableau, Looker, et cetera. The problems associated with that would be that frontline managers would really struggle to be able to consume that and make sense of it, because most frontline managers don't come from an analytical background. They come from a communications and empathy background. And so we're like, great, here's how we're thinking about it. We have a dedicated performance management solution here that measures the quantity and quality of selling behavior, and then it uses large language model AI in order to turn that into words that talks not just to your managers, but also to your reps to drive accountability and automate that. How does that sound? Or you might start out, they're like, yeah, that doesn't actually sound all that terribly great. By doing these research interviews, you're eventually going to converge on like the white hot center, which then eventually turns into your sales motion.
So to recap, essentially what you're doing is you're setting agenda, and then you're coming in with research that allows you to build a point of view on the problem that you think they have. And you're saying like, hey, typically when you have this many SDRs, this many reps on your team, you probably have this type of problem. Is that true? Is it not true?
I
to what extent
maybe.
do you have that problem? And one of two things will happen. They'll either say, yeah, I have that problem, or no, I won't. What do you do when you find that you meet with 4 or 5 of these CROs and all of them are like, yeah, this is a 1 or a 2 for me? Do you, in those calls, keep switching to different problems? Do you have a list of like 20 problems that you're trying to test with them? How do you pivot in that moment, or how do you know when it's right to pivot?
So in the first step, like if you're getting a bunch of people who are like, yeah, I don't have that problem, well, back to the drawing board, man. And so then that kind of comes back to, where do people typically get problems that they're addressing in startups? And usually it's something that it's like some sort of problem that they encountered in their prior job, or usually that's a really good one, right? Because at least then you have an indication that at least somebody has this problem. But if it turns out that was bespoke to your organization, yeah, this organization, your organization had that, but nobody else does. Well, that's actually a really important thing to figure out early versus building a bunch of software for a problem that people don't have. So I think in the first case, it's like back to the drawing board. In the second case, where it's, oh, cool, I really have that problem, but like your solution doesn't sound super awesome, or I have this tangential problem. A really important thing as an entrepreneur is to just follow that sucking sound. Lenny Rachitsky is a phenomenal podcaster and writer, and he actually has this big B2B series on where startup ideas came from. A lot of them are pivots, right? A lot of them are pivots. And then the question is, do you pivot during the interview stage, or do you pivot after you've built a bunch of software you have to throw away? Ideally, you pivot earlier on where you haven't build a bunch of software that doesn't matter. But I think what we do as entrepreneurs is we're trying to find unsolved problems in the market that we can then fit technology to and then earn a margin on solving that problem. So if that problem doesn't exist, then we probably shouldn't build something associated with it. Or if that problem does exist, but it's well satisfied, then there's probably not an opportunity for us to build something that's differentiated there. In either of those scenarios, you need to find another problem, either tangential or totally different.
I'm curious. So taking this back to sales a little bit, is I think so many sellers come in with a bias around, what do I want to pitch, rather than letting the conversation go where it needs to go. And so you have to stop and you have to say, this is what I'm gathering so far. Do I have this right? And then that question, there's a no-lose scenario. They either say yes, and you look great, or they say no, and they correct you, and you get the truth. Like, it's a no-lose scenario. And that's what I see with so many reps, so many founders that I talk to too, is like, they want to go down a path, but they don't really want to know, does a person really believe or agree with what they're saying? And have they confirmed that they're getting it right? And that's where you got to stop, slow down, and get that pause in a really meaningful way, not say, does that make sense? Does that make sense?
It's like people don't want to have their baby called ugly. And this is a big problem that this is why not only can you not get married to the problem that may not exist, you certainly don't want to be married to a particular solution. And I think founders can oftentimes, because they have some sort of like crazy idea for what the better mousetrap ought to be shaped, versus you actually want people you want to push them away. And I was just teaching my reps about strip lining the other day, or reteaching folks about strip lining. Be like, yeah, you know what? This actually doesn't seem like it's a problem for you. And if someone's, yeah, I agree with you, it's great, we can be friends, we're going to part ways here, versus, no, I actually do think this is a problem. Okay, great. But you have to be confident. You have to have pretty good confidence to do the takeaway.
Yeah, but I think the thing that's interesting is it's no lose. Like, you're showing, I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to put together the pieces. I might not be able to do it quite right because I don't have all the understanding and context you do, but I'm attempting to. And you can see how my brain's working. And I think people really gravitate to that type of selling, that type of communication, that type of conversation.
Toward the end of these interviews, sometimes they're like, yes. And at that point, you're like, awesome, here's a proposal. Maybe be a pilot customer. But oftentimes there are founders who aren't ready for that yet, right? They're not that close. And so if they're not a paid customer, the two traditionally lower levels of investment that you can get from people are, you could ask them to be part of your customer advisory board. They're basically advisors with a small amount of equity. Or you could ask them to be a design partner and be one of your initial users. Let's talk about the customer advisory board first. What's the right way to structure that thing? How does a customer advisory board work? I'm wondering if you could just define it for the audience and explain the right way to set up a customer advisory board.
So what you want is you want to have humans, right, who have the problem, are unsatisfied with the current solution, who can go along with you. Now, it would be great if they were paying you to do that, which is why if somebody has high magnitude of pain and high dissatisfaction with their current solution, and depending on the segment of customer that you're going after, oftentimes they will have budget for these sort of things, like speculative budget. If that's the case, fantastic. If that's not the case, and you have to build it on spec, one way of organizations do this is they do consulting on the side and they build a solution while they're consulting, or they build a solution that gives them leverage in their consulting kind of practice, or they have some sort of funding or what have you. In either of those situations, what you're going to need is someone who's going to adopt your solution and validate, hey, does this solve your problem better than that existing solution as indicated by some sort of KPI, right? Are your managers performance managing more effectively, and are your reps performing in a higher performance capacity as a result of your adoption of this thing, as indicated by a rise in activity levels, as indicated by a rise in attainment, as indicated by XYZ? And you can't just do that without customers. And so a customer advisory board is really fantastic for that, because now you can share out with them like mock-ups, or, hey, we've got a demo, we've got a beta, we've got some alpha software here. Let's go ahead and set up a bunch of demos for that and get your feedback on this. Here's a video. What do you think? And like just having an audience who's bought in some sort of capacity that you can then do that with is very compelling. Ideally, your design partners are paying you, in which case it's like the first bucket, but it's essentially the same sort of thing where you have someone who is committed to solving that problem that we validated that they have, that they're unsatisfied with the current solution, through adopting this software in order to solve that problem. I think both of those can be very effective things to do, but one of the things you want to do is you want to leverage the heck out of them. So you can't just be like, you're on the board. All right, put it on LinkedIn. Yay. There have to be actions associated with it, like interviews and demos and feedback and usage and desk sides and so on and so forth. There have to be actions that are happening, or else it's not all that helpful.
The way that oftentimes we thought about it at Pave was, number one, we didn't do design part, to your point. It's no, they're just going to pay to be customers, or they're going to be on our customer advisory board. And oftentimes we would use customer advisory boards if we felt like we weren't even ready to solve the main problem yet. That means we're not even market ready. The customer advisory board is going to get us that 50% or that 70% mark, right? At that point, then we're ready to sign early customers as early adopters, maybe at the 50 or 70% point, where we at least solve the big problem for them. And that big problem is so vision aligned that they're okay with some of the smaller problems burning for now. And those customers are the ones who will pull you in the right direction so that you solve the right small problems. But I remember there was one time that PwC Middle East came inbound at Pave. And they wanted us to sign literally just the craziest problems in the world. And it was so tempting to sign that customer on day one. And I've seen it so freaking often where a company signs the wrong first customer, which means you oftentimes solve the wrong big problem.
And I think that's something you just have to be mindful of as relates to design partners. You don't necessarily want to be captured as a professional service for a large organization. A champagne problem, hard to deal with, or hard to contend with, but just something to be mindful of there, because you don't want your entire product roadmap being dictated by somebody who may have bespoke problems. If they have the same problems as everybody else and they're paying you to solve it, and like you, then you can resell those same features to everybody else. All right, sweet. But if they have like weird bespoke problems like PwC Middle East might have, then yes, that would potentially be a problem.
Well, Pete, this was an amazing show. We have to move to our final question. We talked about a lot of good habits as it pertains to founder-led sales. It's time to talk about a bad one. So if there was one bad habit in the world of founder-led sales that all founders should break today, what would that be?
Expecting somebody else to sell your first customers for you. Doesn't work.
That is about as much of a mic drop as we need.
Done.
Pete, thank you for an amazing show. Everyone, hang on for a 60-second recap coming up soon. Cheers. All right, Mark, it is time for a 2x2 recap email from this episode with Pete Kazanjy.
Number one, I know he said it at the end. I know it was the mic drop moment, but it bears repeating. Your first customers are on the founder. If anybody else gets them, then they're not really customers, if you ask me. And you lose so much of the richness of all those conversations. And number two, You better not have bias going into discovery. It's the hardest thing to stop as a rep. You want the conversation to go a certain way. You're scared that it might not go in a direction that you understand, or it might go in a direction you don't understand. Pause, take a breath, let it go where it needs to go, and meet the customer there.
Number 3. If it is going well, you have a read option to go in for the kill. If they're saying, yeah, this is a problem, yeah, I believe in your solution, I bring them on as one of your pilot customers. But number 4, that might not always be the case. So if that's not the case, if you aren't ready to solve the big problem yet, you may consider launching a customer advisory board where you give a small amount of equity for people who are invested to be early advisors on your product and get your product to the point where you can solve one big problem. Folks, if you like this one, we did a whole webinar on founder-led sales. It was how Pave got their first customers, and it was featuring the CEO of Pave, Matt, my previous boss, myself, and the early stage Pave sales team. So a link to that is in the show notes. I would definitely recommend watching that if you like this one. Stay tuned for the next one. Peace.